Hello, Simran. How are you?
I am well, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for joining the podcast. I am very excited to kind of talk through your journey with you, your journey that spans multiple industries, and so many fun things that you have done along the way. Um, as you and I talked about before, I really became aware of some of the fantastic sort of advocacy work that you are doing, the work that you are doing to amplify so many stories of so many different people. In fact, when I was thinking about a title for this podcast, I was like, the title needs to be Scaling Stories, because I feel like that's what you do. You scale, right? And you amplify. But you've had such an interesting sort of trajectory of things that you've done before launching your own organization. I would love to talk a little bit about, some of your background and journey, just to kind of familiarize the audience with who we're speaking to right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, everybody, my name is Simran. I got my degree in communication studies and marketing from Cal State Long Beach, and I am a West Coast girl based in California. And I basically took my degree and went straight into the marketing field with that.
Mhm.
One of my first jobs right out of college was working for a beauty influencer,
Yep.
and she was also starting her own makeup line and brand at the same time. Her name is
Right.
Duka Yala. She's the founder and CEO of Live Tinted. So, if
Yes.
any listeners are familiar with that, I had the chance to work directly with her. And during that time, just being in that startup space, you are exposed to so much, right? Especially when
Right.
somebody's trying to build their company from the ground up. And it was such an invaluable experience. And through that, I learned mainly about social media marketing and
Mhm.
community building, like online community building. And those were the lessons and key takeaways that I took from that. I wanted to continue on this path of marketing. So I went and took those skills to a real estate company here locally in the Bay Area and handled their all of the marketing for that real estate firm and their internal operations.
Mhm.
And at this point, I was like, I actually want to pivot into tech. And
Mhm.
being from the Bay Area, it's kind of what everybody was doing. I was
Everybody
like,
goes to tech. Yeah, sure.
tech,
Yep.
exactly. So I had the chance to work for a very early stage startup. I came in as their ninth hire.
Wow.
The company at the time was called Agora, and they are now called Kojo Technologies.
Mm.
They're a construction tech company, so they were doing something extremely revolutionary, especially even now at the time of, turning a lot of paper records into electronic processes at the time,
Oh, wow.
specifically procurement.
Yeah.
And I was going in as their operations. So I worked directly with the CEO of the company,
Mhm.
and I learned everything,
Yeah, I
everything
bet.
that comes with.
Well, especially at the ninth person, you're learning everything, and you're probably doing most things too, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So
Yeah.
I came in as the ninth hire, helped scale that company to over 100 employees in the midst of the pandemic.
Mm.
So just rapid growth, rapid changing, like
Right.
both within work circumstances and just the world circumstances, right? Like
Right.
just having to learn how to adapt to all of that. And in the midst of that, I was going through a lot of, and I think, this was widely talked about as well during the time as well of like during the pandemic that so many people were making a shift in this time of like,
Right.
really trying to find their purpose, really trying to find what it is that they want to spend their time doing because we
Mm.
we were collectively getting back a good amount of time as well. And I think during this time, I had a very, very drastic change in just how I wanted to move forward in the world.
Yeah.
And it kind of meant like the way that I like to describe it, I kind of tore down everything that I had built up at that point, and I was like, "This isn't what I want." I was like, "I thought
Sure.
it's what I wanted, but it's not what I want, so let's start again."
Sure.
And, that's when I started my business. That's when I started my consulting business, and I basically just took everything that I learned from, like, my career and working in startups and started advising early stage companies with that.
Mm. Mm.
Thus was born Simran Nath LLC. So what I do right now is I'm a consultant for early stage startups, anywhere from pre-seed up to Series B in business operations and marketing. But I
Mhm.
also help founders and funders come together through events as well. So I'll pause there.
No, I love all that, and especially what you said too about that I had built up so much, and then I decided that, for various circumstances, I needed to tear it down and I needed to start again, right? So many of the entrepreneurs that we've had on this show talk about, I don't want to call it an aha moment because that sounds kind of, kind of trite and kind of hokey, but that was kind of where they arrived to, right? Which is like, hey, all these things that I'm doing and even the success that I have sort of like started to endure aren't satisfying me or aren't the right thing for me. So I need to kind of make this significant pivot, right? And you know, and you did that with Simran Nath LLC.
Correct.
But I do want to talk a little bit about how, you know, your transition from influencer marketing and an early career and real estate and tech transition, as you've taken those sort of experiences with you, I'm sure that your current clients benefit from that. So maybe just talk a little bit more, Simran, about how you kind of take those experiences moving through those industries and applying them to, you know, what you're doing with your own organization.
Yeah. So there's actually this really good book that I'm sure maybe some of your listeners have read. It's called Principles by Ray Dalio. Maybe you yourself have even read it. But I do think that like this idea of just taking you once you find a process that works,
Mm,
and this is everything that tech is about, right? Like find a
right.
repeatable, scalable process and keep iterating on that as you
Yes.
continue to grow and scale. And I think that just learning how to do that across or my experience of being able to do that in the makeup industry, in the real estate industry, and in the tech industry, and even
Right.
all the different branches of like health tech, construction tech, fintech, and all those different
Sure. All these adjacencies, right? Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, that I've been able to do, that's really where I've been able to set myself apart from these companies. But I
Nice.
also think the other thing that I do that or why people want to work with me specifically is because I'm so intentional about
Mhm.
the clients that I want to work with
Mhm.
because and again, this came from, you know, really reassessing the way that I wanted to work in the world, the way that I wanted to move, and the way that I wanted to make a difference in the world was by understanding my values. And once you do
Yes.
that, and you align with companies who also do that, not only is your work more fulfilling, but it just you're just able to have better conversations with your clients and with my CEOs. I'm able to align with them on what they want to do and how they want to scale. And
Mm,
I really believe that it is that transparency that allows me to build like lasting relationships with them and continue to have that open dialogue of back and forth of like how are we going to take this and make it better or how like you know this is going great but how are we going to make this specifically attain this this specific outcome that we want from this campaign, etc.
going back to scaling, right? And that's really what you're helping them do. I like what you just said too about the intentionality of the kind of clients, right? That you are working with. Can you say a little bit more about what makes for the ideal customer profile, I guess, if you will, for Simran Nath?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really comes and you know, one of my pillars is transparency.
Mhm.
I
Sure.
think that you know, there are obviously like in the market, there are a lot of people who can do operations. There are a lot of people who can, you know, take on a project and being able to move forward with that. But I think something that I look for is somebody who has that growth mindset and
Sure.
is able to take feedback back and forth and from both ways too, right? Because I constantly see this as a relationship where we're
Yeah.
just trying to grow forward from that. So I
Right.
guess like transparency and growth mindset are definitely
Two
two
big
big
criteria.
things.
Yep.
Yeah, and the last one is actually also vulnerability because I
Mm.
think that especially in the startup world, it is such a vulnerable
Yes.
period. Like, you know, to take these founders who maybe this is their first time doing it,
Right.
or maybe you have a successful founder, but it's a completely different industry. I cannot tell you how many times, you know, I'm talking to people and they're like, you have no idea how much this means to me. People trust me with their livelihood,
Mm.
and it is my responsibility to make that happen. And I get
Right.
that, right?
Right.
That is such a big onus and responsibility that CEOs have that I don't really think people always consider or maybe like understand fully. So
Yeah.
that vulnerability or that level of understanding and everything that that takes, I think that key piece has been also what I've seen tends to do really well when you know vetting my clients and learning how to work
Mhm.
with them and then moving forward.
That's a great example about the vulnerability. I really appreciate that because a follow-up that I wanted to ask you was, you know, we talk a lot about, oh, you've worked with a lot of founders and helped them scale and what, you know, where did they go wrong? I would prefer to focus on where did they go right, you know? And so I am curious, Imran, as you've helped some of these founders scale, they've kind of, you know, been the right clients for you. You've done your vetting. Where have some of those early stage companies been really successful as part of working with you? Where have they kind of seen their successes? Has it been just around getting from product market fit to scaling their product, or has it been more than that? I'm curious as to where you've, you know, seen the impact, I guess, and the good.
Yeah, so I think where I specifically am able to make the most impact is when a company is transitioning from seed to Series A. So I guess, this is when you find product market fit. This is when you're really trying to scale and grow internally, and you're trying to find the right people to do that.
Mm,
So again, and I think this goes back down to really understanding the values of not only the individual, but like the company altogether and helping create those values, and then being able to bring in the right people to recruit that and grow that, and just having the right mindset of people who are able to
mm,
scale the company, right? Like I work, aside from marketing, I work in operations, and
right.
I understand that, I say this often. I feel like operations is one of those jobs where you're constantly doing something, but people don't always know what you're
I don't always
doing.
know
It's
what it
so
is.
behind the
Yeah.
scenes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it isn't until so, like, people will know something isn't going, or something will not is going right when it's an operational thing, but other than that, nobody really ever notices.
Well,
So
yeah, yeah, my theory on that is like, they don't realize until it's stopped, they don't realize because it's so good and it's so transparent until it stops, and then they're like, "Oh, that thing stopped. Why did it stop?" That's a
Exactly,
problem. Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
So, yeah, I think that's really where I'm able to provide the most value, because
Sure.
I said, I've been able to help companies. It's such a intense moment in a company, especially after you find product market fit, right? It's like, oh my
Right.
gosh, we have clients, we have recurring
Yeah.
revenue.
Now what?
To
Yeah.
scale, yeah, it's like
Yeah.
let's get going, let's bring in the right people, and it's also the most exciting time in a company. Like I think,
I couldn't agree more, and I know, and I have to believe that your experience as chief of staff and the operational pieces really helps those early stage and even the more mature startups, right? Kind of think about, how do we start to operationalize? How do we perform at scale? Like you said, oh my gosh, we have product market fit. Oh my gosh, we have customers. Oh my gosh, we have recurring revenue. Now what? Now how do we scale that? Right. And
exactly.
make it sustainable. These are good problems to have, but they're scary as heck, right?
Exactly, and I think, those are always one of my philosophies is that you always want to have good problems, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think
Yeah,
good problems are always the best problems to have, so I try and pivot my life to position myself to have as many good problems as I can.
I love it. I mentioned when we started the conversation, Simran, that one of the things that really kind of was intriguing to me, right, was your focus on the amplification of stories of people who are out there in the community making an impact, right? And I love the advocacy that you're doing. And there's been a big portion of your life that you've dedicated to community impact. Can you talk a little bit more about things like Period 24 and some of the
Yeah,
work that you've done around nonprofits and those things? I
of
think are really powerful. And I think, again, set what you're doing apart, in the value that you bring to an engagement.
Thank you. Yeah, of course. So in 2019, I started a nonprofit organization called Period 24.
Mhm,
And the reason for this, or mission, was to end period poverty.
mhm.
And believe it or not, 1 in 4 menstruators have to choose between putting food on the table or buying menstrual products,
Yeah,
which I
it's
think
crazy.
is absolutely insane. Yes,
Yeah,
especially in a
crazy.
country like America. And this idea was spurred from going back to my homeland. I'm from Fiji. I was born in
Mhm,
Fiji. My parents
mhm.
migrated to the US when I was very young. So I was born in the island, but I was raised here in the States, in
Sure.
California. But I remember going back to visit my homeland, and my sister had gotten her period, and we went to the largest supermarket at the state capital within the island.
Area. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I remember looking at the shelf, and I only saw one option of pads and one option of tampons.
Mhm.
And even the tampons, I'm not sure how familiar you are with this, Richard, but it didn't have an applicator.
Right.
And I did not understand how people would use this,
How would they use it? Yeah, yeah.
right, but I also understand that, these topics aren't widely discussed about,
Sure.
if at all, because just culturally, we're much more.
Culturally, yeah, there's all this stigma and yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So to me, there was this huge gap in education. There was this huge gap in
Mhm.
access. And once that was where the inspiration came from. And when I realized that that restriction of access was also being translated here in America, I was like, okay, this is something that I can do.
Yeah.
So during that time, established the nonprofit, partnered with organizations like LinkedIn, companies like Quora donated their products over to us. We were able
Mm.
to donate menstrual care products to youth centers, to the LGBT centers
Remarkable. That's remarkable.
across
Yeah.
the US, yeah, so, and it was something so simple, right? It
Mm.
was it was something that took it that I mean, I deal with this every month, and
Right.
many
Yeah,
millions of
many
women around
millions
the
of
world,
women, half the population.
literally.
Yeah.
So if and I think that's always kind of been my thing, is that if I can help in some way
Mm.
to make a change, like, why not? But
Yeah.
that also was the opening to, my passion in women's health.
Right.
I think just overall, you talk about the advocacy work that I do, and if I really have to funnel it down to it, it comes down to being a woman,
Right.
right? That, I mean, just look at the ways that women are so restricted in so many different ways, whether
Mhm.
that comes down to being able to buy menstrual care products
Right.
on a monthly basis. But as a professional woman, we know that there's a gap in
Wage. Yeah. Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
wage gap, there's a
Yeah.
funding gap, there's
Right.
there's all
So
of
many.
these.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So again, I think that my mentality has always been that if I have the ability to make a change in something, I'm going to do that. If I have a
Mm.
voice that people are willing to listen to, it is my responsibility to be heard. It is my
Mm.
responsibility to do something about that.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of just the mentality that I've taken there, and that has progressed. Period 24 has inspired the work that I continue to do in women's health. I was a former chief of staff to an early stage startup
Right.
as well, which focused on helping people with uteruses better understand their hormones through data-backed science,
Mhm.
and continuing to do advocacy work till this day, whether that just means being involved in conversations, networking with the right people, etc. So
I think it's important to distinct there that advocacy doesn't have to be this extremely large gesture, right? Like you say, you can be the large gesture like you did, which was you started a nonprofit, you created all these meaningful partnerships with organizations like LinkedIn and others. But also, advocacy can just be, like you say, facilitating a conversation,
yeah,
right? Or being present in a conversation when
yeah.
someone feels like they don't know who they can talk to, or helping just to make that connection or that network for that individual, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is why creating spaces for women is so important,
Mm.
right? And I think that the last month, so Biden's administration passed the first executive order to provide funding in women's health, and
Mm.
the DNC held an event last month in Chicago to talk about how these funds
Right.
would be allocated.
Right.
Putting myself into that room and being able to hear how these funds will be allocated, seeing all the people that are doing work, whether that's in clinical trials, whether that's in breast cancer research, or whatever the case may be, in ways that is affecting the people in this country, and seeing how we're going to help that just having access to that is insane, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
continuing to do that, and not only that, but also reminding people that people who look like me also deserve to be in those rooms. People who come
Sure.
from a background like me, like, they have that ability to do that. I think that's really where a lot of my advocacy work inspired from.
I really appreciate the fact that you've, fully not even just stepped into this entrepreneurial space, but you are fully engrossed now into this entrepreneurial space with what you are doing with your own organization. But you haven't backed off from that advocacy and, like I said, the amplification of those people making an impact and telling those stories. This is really important to you, isn't it?
It is. It
Yeah.
definitely is.
Yeah.
I think, like I said, I think it's important. I think
Yeah.
it's come from just growing up in a culture that maybe wasn't always encouraged. Like, women weren't always encouraged to be themselves, or to
Sure.
speak their mind, or to travel, right? Like,
Right.
there's so many limitations that was put on culturally.
Yeah.
Bless my parents. I think they're very open-minded, and they've allowed me to step out in so many different ways that I think a lot of people who look like me have had to, not to say that I haven't had to, like, advocate for myself and fight for.
Right.
Maybe that's it. I've just had to, like, advocate for myself since I was a very young age. So
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, if I've had to do this, then sharing my story can help other people, see that,
I
whether
love it.
that's a woman my age, younger than me, or even older than me, who's like, hey, my daughter should have these
Yeah.
opportunities as
These
well.
opportunities as well, right? She is going to stand on this, your shoulders, of the success of your shoulders, right? And then so on and so forth. And
Exactly.
wouldn't that be wonderful? As you think about Simran Nath and the work that you are doing and kind of where you are right now, relative to where you would like Simran Nath to be, what kind of, what other kind of like hopes and aspirations that you have there, Simran? Also, where are you making those hopes and aspirations a reality, I guess, is what I'd love to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the way that I see the work that I'm doing is to have a global impact.
Hmm.
And in a way, I am already doing that, right?
Hmm.
Simran Nath LLC operates in across the US as well as in other countries as well. And
Fantastic.
that is one way that I want to continue to do that, is like
Mhm.
continue expanding and expanding, knowing that my company and my brand and everything is rooted in the values of transparency and vulnerability,
Mhm.
and moving forward as with as much integrity as I can.
Sure.
Um, and I do think that those, especially, I will say this, working in Silicon Valley in the age of AI, when you have so many
Oh gosh,
machines
so
that are
much
able to
machinery. Yep.
simplify, yeah, able to simplify so many of our day-to-day operations, what it really
Mhm.
comes down to is the people that you want to work with
Mhm.
is going to be people who resonate with you, and people who also have this mentality of, okay, let's continue to rise up, let's continue to work together with other minority groups, whether that's women, women of color, immigrants, etc., to
Sure.
see, providing voices for them, providing opportunities for them,
Mhm.
and seeing how this can like really create a domino effect. So
Yeah.
I think like castle in the sky, that's kind of how I see it.
That's where it continues to go. Yeah. I like how you're really thinking about how you're sharing your experiences as an immigrant woman as part of this, right? And also the notion of like as you scale on a global basis, right? Because it is a global community that we're talking about here, right?
Exactly. Mhm.
I love that. When you think about who you really want to, and you don't have to name names, Simran, but maybe just think about sort of the types of clients that are ones that would be kind of dream ideal state for you, or the types of partners that would be ideal state for you. I'm sure they are the types of folks that embody the same sort of values and principles that you do, but have you given even more thought to kind of like what's next for you in terms of the types of partners or clients that you'll work with?
Yeah, I don't mind name dropping. Like, it's manifesting, right?
Yeah, manifesting is good. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Companies like Sephora, companies like
Yeah.
Nike, where
Yeah.
there is a very clear, strong brand, strong identity, and this constant idea for including,
Mm,
brands from all over the world. Like Sephora has done such a great job, and especially in the beauty industry, right?
right.
Where beauty is, I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry for a very good reason. But the way that it has expanded its color palette on, incorporating more women of color owned
More. Yeah.
businesses.
Yeah. Sure. And you were part of that well before, right? With Live Tinted,
Exactly.
right? Yeah. Early stages of that. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I think like that's probably where it's come from, is just like,
Mm,
seeing this place where it's like, okay, if at some point I'm able to work with you guys on like either on a marketing or an operational level, coming in
right.
as a consultant, oh my gosh, dream company.
Even
And I
better, right?
can,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
similarly with Nike, working on a campaign with them, that would be absolutely phenomenal, just because they have a global impact. No matter where you go in the world,
Mm.
Nike has such a huge impact to to literally every person in the world knows what Nike is,
Oh,
right?
sure. Absolutely. Yep.
So I think that's those are like two distinct companies that have always been in my mind, that I'm like, okay,
Right.
once we do that, I'm like, whew,
We're there. Yeah.
we're
We're there. Yeah.
there.
So, how about a quick fun follow on to that? Who's your favorite founder? Do you have a favorite founders or a favorite leader that you've really looked at and said this person sort of embodies a lot of what, again, my principles, and gosh, I'd love to have dinner with that person, maybe,
It's so funny. I have thought about this for some time, and maybe my answer might surprise you, but it's actually Rihanna,
Ah,
from like the singer
yeah,
Rihanna. Yeah,
yeah,
as
yeah. We did a highlight on her on this podcast and her whole brand. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah,
And and then it's exactly that. It's the brand that
mhm,
she's created,
yeah.
and I think that she is from the Caribbean.
Hmm.
She has always just stayed true to her roots, and has
Right,
also just been true to herself,
right,
especially as she's progressed personally and professionally. And you
right.
see that in her
Hmm.
work. But what I really appreciate about her is that she is who she is.
Yeah.
She doesn't change anything about her. And what I mean
No,
by this
it's
is,
very unapologetic. Yes. Yes.
absolutely, and she coined
Yeah.
that term, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yes. That's why I said
she's yeah, exactly.
it.
And I think that that is that though that she's just somebody that I really respect, especially
That's
just
lovely. That's
and
cool.
even being in the beauty industry and knowing
Yeah.
that she hasn't, done any, like, she's always advocated for beauty in a way that's very
Sure.
inclusive, in a way that's very be who you are.
Right.
Um, I think I would love to have dinner with her.
Well, we are manifesting a dinner between you and Ree at some point, so
Oh
we're
my god.
gonna make that happen. So when you're not in founder mode, right?
Mm,
I know from what you're doing on social, you're reading, you're writing, you're traveling, but
Yeah.
it does always seem to kind of tie back in my opinion, right, to your overall sort of mission of social advocacy and impact and amplification, and like I said, telling stories. So how do you switch off founder mode sometimes, Simran, and just like tune out? Or can you? And how do you balance sort of the need to read, write, and travel, but not always maybe tie it back to Simran Nath,
Mm,
the
that's a good
company, not
question.
the person?
Yeah, that's a really
Yeah,
good question.
yeah.
I think for the first half, do I switch off? I do because I think it's very important. I have
Mm,
burnt out many times before, and I'm
sure.
not my best when I burn out, right? I think that um, we have a culture that really emphasizes the grind and, emphasizes how
Yes.
important it is, and that's
Yes.
a part of that is, like, obviously it's 100% true. If you
Mhm.
want to get the things that you're dreaming of, you have to work hard, but you also have to know when to give yourself rest. So I incorporate this, on almost a daily basis where, there are times when I'll completely shut off my laptop,
Nice.
go work out, go for a walk, do
Yep.
like, unplug, leave my phone at home and, like, go to the lake or something and just, just
Mhm.
really try and unwind. So whether that's like, completely disconnecting, going trying to step back into nature, or even just meditating in the mornings just for like
Mm.
even 5 minutes
5
before.
minutes. Yep.
Yeah, it really makes a big difference. So
Yeah.
I try to be as conscious as I can, even in my daily life, to try and disconnect from like founder mode and like, work mode and, just being me. The other half
Mhm.
of your question of like how, like, always relating that back to work, that is something that I'm working on. And I don't think I know how to do that quite yet. And I think that you're probably the first person who's maybe been able to like make that distinct connection. Um, and is it healthy? Is it unhealthy?
I
I
didn't
don't.
need to call you out on that. I just see it, and to me, actually, it's very remarkable. I look at it and say,
Thank
wow,
you.
I think it's very remarkable that you do that. But yeah, I get it, right? You need that separation still at the same
Yeah.
time, right? Yeah,
I
yeah,
will also say this though, that, it makes me also wonder, like, maybe that's a good thing, right? Maybe it
sure,
means I'm in alignment with my purpose because I
right.
think that, I truly do believe that if you do what you want to do, like work doesn't feel like work. And that's often how I feel. It's also why I chose the route of entrepreneurship because
Mm.
I'm making impacts in the places that I want to make impact without
Right.
burning myself out.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yep. Yeah, I had a mentor who said, to your point, like if you want to make money, do the things that you love, not the things that, you feel you have to do, right? Because
mm,
if you do what you love, you will be successful ultimately,
yeah.
right? It's funny what you just said too about the, even 5 minutes a day. I had a really great streak of like, my dog walking time was my Richard and dog time, right? And then slowly what started to creep into that was, well, while I'm walking the dog, I'll just take this call, right? Or while I'm walking the dog, actually literally sit there and scroll on my phone as I'm walking him, right? And I've tried to make this very conscious effort to go back to that is not work time, right? That
Mhm.
is like, not talking on a call or not scrolling through endless emails or what have you. It is truly like back to like, I'm enjoying this walk for the next 12 minutes or however long it is, 15 minutes, and not focusing on work for that time,
Yeah.
right?
It is
Yeah.
hard. It's
Yeah,
hard.
and it is hard. Yeah, it really is.
Especially when
Well,
you're doing things on your own, right? And I think
yes, I
that's
was gonna
like
say
what's
that,
harder.
especially yeah,
Yeah, like, especially right now, like, it's in the thick of it, but, I in other ways that I do that, like, I really lean on my friends too, like,
sure.
my friends, my family, and oftentimes I kinda just need them to, like, remind me, like so for viewers who don't know, Richard and I met at a mutual friends well, one of my best friends, who was
Yep,
also one of your previous no,
coworkers. Yep,
coworkers, yes,
yep.
and I remember I
Now
was talking.
friend, but coworker, now
Right.
friend.
That's why I was just like, "Wait,
Yeah,
which one?" Um, but I remember I was talking to another one of my friends who, the day that I landed, and I was kinda just, like, decompressing, and she was like,
mm,
"Simran," she was like, "You're in Chicago for your friend's wedding." She was like, "Don't think about work. You never, like, not think about work. Just go
right.
be present at your friend's wedding."
I
And
love
then I
that.
was just like, "Okay, you're right. You're so
Yep,
right." And then,
yep,
like, after that, I was like, "Okay, let's do that." But,
yeah,
it's sometimes you need those reminders of your friends who are like, and I'm sure you know this too, we're constantly telling ourselves, "Oh my god, I still got it. I have to do X, Y, and Z. I'm not doing enough
sure.
of this." And I tell myself that a lot. I feel
Right.
this way a lot where I feel like I'm not doing enough.
Mm,
But I think just having those people around you who are reminding you like, "Hey, no, you actually are doing a lot. Look at all
yes.
these things that you've been able to do. It's okay to like be present in this moment." I think
Yes.
for me, that's very helpful.
I was going to ask you, Simran, about your posse, right? About your community and the people that have been there for you and kind of hold you accountable, like you said, right? Call
Yeah.
you out, hold you accountable. It's really important. Um, but I'm gonna regress back into work a little bit. We're talking about
Yeah.
not work, but who is part of your entrepreneurial community?
Yeah.
Where you are.
I think, I mean, obviously mentors, right? Like, I
Mhm.
think
Yeah.
that's a big thing there. So, I have my mentors that I lean on for,
Mhm.
for that. I also have a career coach that I like,
Mhm.
actively participate, like, work with them as well. And therapy, right? Like I think like I do
Yes.
use like, therapy as a way to like, lean
So
on
important.
work for.
Yeah.
I think that something that I like to think about is like I have a team, right? So
Mhm.
it's just like my team can be like, different people. So like my therapist, my coach, my mentors are part of like, they're part of a certain team. My like going to the gym or having a gym buddy or whatever, they're accountable for another team, right? Like how am I
Yes.
going to constantly build out my
Right.
team that's going to help me stay accountable for this, etc.
Yeah.
But I also think that, as I've continued to network and as I've continued to grow with that, just having that community of other founder friends also serves
Mm.
as a way of like, having that like founder community, etc. There are
Mhm.
certain things that, I was talking about this with a friend where it's like, in college, you have your college friends. After that, like, if you decide to like, go to secondary school, like, after college, then you have those friends as well. I stopped at a bachelor's, but like, I had my like post college friends. And then
Sure.
as I continued to like go up in my career, I was like, now I have my CEO friends. And like,
Right.
it's a very different, it's just very different levels of friendship
Mhm.
as you continue to move throughout your career. And I think that having my friends who also are founders, early stage founders, is just there's a level of just like understanding that like they
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
that
Simpatico, right? Yeah, they get it. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
exactly.
Absolutely. You've mastered a lot of skills, Simran, through your entrepreneurial journey because you've had to. Like you said, you were in a company of 9 people. You're picking up all new kinds of skills. You're transferring those skills onto your clients today and helping them to grow and to scale. Kind of a fun question. If you could wake up tomorrow and be a master of a new skill, what would that skill be for you?
I wanna learn how to code. That's it.
Yeah, that was a quick answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a
I
quick
feel like
one.
that would just make me, like,
Yeah.
the absolute, like, amazing person in tech. Like, I've always thought that, at some point, I'm going to write code.
Uh-huh.
I don't know who's gonna let me, I'll probably break everything, but
That's okay. Yeah, well, you
I
gotta
would
break it before you get it right, correct?
yeah,
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
learn how to code. And
Yeah.
I guess, like, this is something I can eventually pick up on, but yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
would be
I'll
nice.
be more why not? I mean, from what I know about you, I'm sure that at some point in time you will start learning how to code. You will
Exactly.
either take it on as a self-directed study, or you will go and have someone teach you how to do that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so cool. As you kind of continue this entrepreneurial journey, and you obviously are working hard with the clients that you're working with, and there's so many experiences that you are learning from them, they are learning from you. Anything really unexpected, Simran, that's happened to you during that journey that really kind of caught you off guard? Because I know certain entrepreneurs are always looking for that, like, if I knew now what I if I knew then what I know now, or the notion of, wow, that really caught me off guard. Anything there that kind of comes to mind, that someone standing where you were standing at the beginning of your journey would be helpful for them to know.
Yeah, I think that, maybe just from an entrepreneurship level, I think that when you really commit, things
Mhm.
start to fall into place, and I
Yeah.
think that I think if there's somebody listening who is like, "I want to start, but I don't know where to start," or "I have this
Yes.
idea and I'm very stuck," etcetera. I recently had a conversation with another founder friend who was in that same boat where,
Mm.
he's like, "I've been working day and night, like waking up at 5 AM, going to bed at 10, and I don't really know. I feel like I'm stuck and going in circles." And I had to be like, when I first met you, this is what you told me your business was doing. And he was like, Simran, you're amazing. I was like, I did nothing. I was like, that was you. That is what you told me. So, don't get stuck. Don't like go around in circles. I'm just, I think you learn so much more from doing than just thinking about doing. So just do
Sure.
it.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing I would also say is that I really learned that, and maybe this goes back to what you said earlier, Richard. Maybe this is why it's harder for me to distinguish, but I
Right.
don't really see a difference between business and people.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is that, when you're doing business, you're working with people. It's not like a separate entity. So it's like, and this is really why that I think understanding your values and the type of people that you want to work with is so important, because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, that is who you're going to be working with. So you have to make
Hmm.
sure that it's aligned. And, this also goes back into, people who are trying to find a co-founder. A
Yeah.
co-founder, like, that process is it's a marriage. So if, if you're in that boat where you're like, "Oh, I wanna do this with somebody," really think about how you're gonna be able to problem solve with that person, how you're going to work through disagreements, how you guys are going to just, like, really learning how to problem
We'll
solve.
learn how to, yeah, work together, right?
Yeah.
And yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's so challenging, right? And but it is so important to surround yourself with the right people, the co-founders, whoever it is, right?
Mhm.
In order to realize that success, right?
Right,
So
exactly. Because
I
I
love
will say that I do think that, like, the right person to, like, who you choose to move forward with your business with will either, like, make or break it, so.
Absolutely. And I've talked to so many solopreneurs who are trying to find a co-founder, or folks who have had a co-founder and realized, oh, wow, this is the wrong person. They don't have the same ideals that I do, the same values. They're not driven by the same mission. So then that becomes a challenging situation as well, right? So how do you do that kind of vetting as part of the process to make sure that those folks, not just co-founders, but anyone, right? Your first hire, your second hire, your
Yeah,
third hire, right? How do they embody, again, your mission, your values, and what you hold, right, most dear to what you're trying to accomplish
exactly.
with your endeavor, right?
Mhm.
I'd love to ask you a question I've never asked anyone on the show before, so here we go, right? Here we go. And that question is, if you think about a noun, person, place, or thing, or a verb that best describes the entrepreneurial journey of Simran Nath, what would that be?
Resilience.
Resilient. I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. So you picked an adverb
Yeah,
or
yeah,
an
and
adjective. An
that actually
adjective.
doesn't fit. Okay, no, let me actually answer the question.
Yeah.
Mm,
Well, I mean, there are many animals that are resilient, right? I mean, so that might be the the answer there, right?
I
Yeah.
guess, yeah, but
Yeah.
I
Good.
guess it's just resilience. I think that
Resilience. Yeah. And that is just because the idea of like you will get knocked down, right? So you have to get back up. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. And I think
Absolutely.
that goes back to also just, um understanding that it's a journey, right?
Yeah.
Like this, like if you decide to pursue entrepreneurship, there's not an end goal. It is a constant journey. And I
Right.
think, like I personally think, and like I mentioned, one of my values is growth, and I'm always trying to
Right.
continue to do better and be better. And I think once you do that, like understanding that entrepreneurship gives you this idea that the world is a playground and you get to figure out what works and what doesn't and how you're able to move through that in the world.
Mm.
And that's what I find very interesting about it. And of course, like, reality checks happen. Like, you
Sure.
can go very far, like, or maybe you need to learn certain skills in order to, be able to get into certain rooms or to be able to have the
Right.
conversation with the right people. But yeah, I think just like in sales, you have to be willing to take like what 100, 500 no's before you get that
Yeah,
yes.
that one, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
And
and
that one
that speaks volumes to resiliency, right?
yeah.
And I think the other thing you just mentioned about, you need certain skills to get into certain rooms. That might just be you need confidence, you need courage, you need something that allows you to walk into that room, own that room, right? And be able to feel like, okay, I'm going to send that email, or I'm going to walk up to this person at this networking event, or I'm going to ask them for something when I've never done that before, right? But you have to figure out how to find the way to do those things, right?
I will say something that maybe isn't like the best piece of advice, but it is a piece of advice that I have learned is that, being well dressed and well spoken and being kind will take you a lot farther than you
Yes,
realize. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
I think that is something that is very underrated, but I think remembering those few things, especially when you're walking into a room, like into
Mm.
a networking space, it goes very far.
I don't disagree with you at all. I don't think that's bad advice. I think, what you said about kindness goes a long way, right? And I think if you approach situations with humility and
Mm,
with kindness, especially when you're asking someone for something, right?
right.
You're going to usually get that thing in return. I tell so many young entrepreneurs who say, well, I want to ask so and so about this, but I'm afraid. And I'm like, look, if you approach them with humility, if you approach them with kindness and you say, look, I really value what you potentially could offer me here, or I think your advice is critical to what I'm trying to do. Can I have 15 minutes of your time? I said, you're going
Right.
to get a lot more yeses than nos to that
Exactly.
kind of approach, right?
Absolutely.
If your approach is cavalier and, cocky and, I don't care if you give me the time or you don't give me then why would I, right? Like if I don't think you're serious, then I'm not going to do it, right? So
Absolutely.
amazing. Yeah. I know you have a wonderful focus on sort of, we talked a little bit about it a minute ago with sort of therapy and journey, and really thinking about your journey
Yeah.
and mindfulness. Is there a mantra that you kind of live by, Simran, both as an entrepreneur and an individual? And how does that kind of help you when things feel really like uncertain or like sort of frenetic?
Yeah, I think something that I've always like said is like let somebody else tell you no before you say no yourself. And even
Mm,
if somebody says no, find a
I
way
like
where
that.
you can like make that happen for yourself.
Yeah, I like that.
Like, and I think it's don't knock it till you try it, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
there's so many ways of that. There's another part of your question that you asked. The
Mm.
mantra and what was the other part?
Oh, just sort of like, again, if it's not a mantra or a quote or anything that helps you, like I said, through times of uncertainty, that helps to kind of reground you, I guess, is what I'm interested in more than anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that my upbringing has kind of influenced a lot of my entrepreneurship journey in the
Mm,
sense that being an immigrant coming here, with not much like there was a lot that I saw my parents struggle. So I grew up
mm.
with a lot of uncertainty, I
Yeah.
think, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of uncertainty. And I think that maybe it was my parents' resiliency, back to that word, that,
That's
really
resiliency. Yeah.
yeah, that I saw made it happen, where there was like, "Okay, this is gonna happen, and we're gonna make sure it's gonna happen," and I saw them do that. So
Mm,
it's like, seeing like, when your parents tell you something, and even though it's really hard and you saw them struggle through that, but they still made it happen, was
mm.
very inspiring, right?
Right.
So I think that, just seeing that and, just understanding that has played a huge part in just, like, going through that, but I also really do believe, as cliche as that may sound, is that things happen for a reason, whether it's good or bad, and again, going back to that growth mindset where if, like, something doesn't go your way, you could, like, sit in that and you could, be sorry for yourself and you could be like, "Oh my god, this didn't happen X, Y, and Z." Or, you could really just take that as a lesson and just being like, "Okay, you know what? This didn't happen because I have something else coming." And I
Right.
guarantee you majority of the time, the other thing coming is much better anyways.
I
So
love it. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Final question for you. The decision to kind of brand your company as your name. I'm curious about that decision.
oh my gosh. I love this question, but I also hate this question
I
because
bet. Yeah. Sorry to ask you. Sorry to ask you.
it's very funny because I'm actually thinking about changing the name of my company for not
Mhm.
because I don't think that, it's there. My sister actually made a joke. She's like, "I can't believe you named your company after yourself." I was like, "Lawyers do it." She was just like, "Yeah,
Yeah,
they got the
they
law
do.
degree,
Yeah,
Simran."
absolutely. Well, and but not only well, that's a funny thing to say, but not only that, like how many like, look, I mean, Koch brothers, I mean, like how many organizations are named after the people? Lots of them, right? So yeah, yeah,
I mean, and this was my thing, I started like again, this was one of those, like, Simran, just do it type of mentalities where I'm like,
yeah,
when I'm sitting there, I'm like, "Okay, what am I gonna name it? I don't know.
yeah,
I'll name it after myself. I can change this later if I need
yeah,
to," which is
absolutely.
the
Yeah,
case, right? So,
sure.
that's kind of where it came from.
I love it.
It's definitely a point of, like, conversation. I've
That's
had,
well,
like
that's good though, because it gets people talking, right? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I've had the CEO of Vets and Tech be like, "No, leave it. It's iconic." So I'm like, "Okay, if you think it's iconic, like, I think
Yes.
maybe
I think
that's a
it's
good
very
thing."
iconic. Look, we'll go back to Rihanna, right? I mean, come on, that's an iconic brand right there that people just know, right? So
Exactly.
I love that. I
Um,
love that.
it
We
was
have
just
been
it was a just do it mentality. Low
right,
key.
absolutely, yeah. Oh God, Simran, thank you so much. We have been talking to Simran Nath, Simran Nath LLC, nathsimran.com. is the website, right? And we'll hook all of that up, all your socials, all ways people can get in touch with you. And again, I'm so happy that you joined us today. Like I said to you, I know I'm repeating myself, but really, as I kind of started to learn more about you and really started to follow the way that you're just amplifying so many stories of people making an impact, and your focus on advocacy and your journey as an immigrant woman into entrepreneurship, so inspiring. So grateful that you spent some time talking to us today. And thank you. And we're going to keep a close eye on what you're doing.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate the opportunity. And like I told you, this honor is mine. Like I was absolutely thrilled when you asked me to be on the show. And I want to continue to support you in whatever way that I can in the podcast. So please, let me know however I can do that.
I will do so. I mean, a lot of our listeners love to hear an entrepreneur and then come to me and say, "Oh, I heard so and so on your show. Can I talk to her?" So, we'll definitely add you to the list of that for sure. But thank you once again, and best of luck to you.
Thank you.